Hey guys, what's up? It's your boy RJ Game News USA here, back today with another video. And I gotta say, the backlash against PlayStation is something I've never quite seen before. This style of backlash goes beyond even what the Xbox One faced back in 2013. I believe with the announcement Sony made to go to an all-digital system starting in 2028, no discs at all, is one of the biggest blunders in gaming history. It absolutely is going to come home to roost to be a horrible decision if they do not backtrack on it. Well, interestingly enough, even though this would be a layup for Microsoft to go with a disc-based platform, doesn't seem like they appeared to do so. However, they are going to be having a way that you could turn your physical disc into some way you could actually own it digitally, which is just one of the issues. We really do have an issue with digital rights management in this country that needs to be addressed. Sony just recently ripped off a whole bunch of movies from their platform, and if you paid for them, you're just shit out of luck. And there needs to be court cases and governments that stand against this. Sony is also repurposing some of its factories that it does business with that usually does discs, and now they're transitioning them to AI lenses of some kind. So it doesn't appear as if Sony is backtracking on this soon. And we're going to watch this clip from Dreamcast guy who, out and out, flat out, Sony is lying about the attach rate of physical games versus digital, especially when it comes to their own first-party games, which actually has a much higher physical game attach rate than a digital one, that are just trying to force-feed this digital-only feature on us regardless. So if you like this kind of content, like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. And without further ado, let's listen to this clip and react.
Interesting that ever since this tweet got posted talking about the end of physical discs and the end of the PlayStation 3 store, not only is this now the biggest PlayStation tweet of all time with literally 115 million views, it's also the fact that look at the trending replies. Everybody is saying this is garbage, this is BS. Why are you even selling the disk drives if it doesn't do anything? Or tons and tons of discussion about essentially boycotting PlayStation. That maybe you'll keep your current PS5, but it's time to segue away. Maybe keep your PlayStation.
And to be completely honest, I'm boycotting PS6 for a whole different reason before we even got to this issue. Because I do have an all-digital PS5 myself. Not to be a hypocrite, I'll be the first to tell you I've already done the all-digital feature, but I want physical games to still exist. It does present itself an alternative marketplace, which does keep overall prices down. And I like what Nintendo is doing with $10 less on digital, but I still think the physical option needs to be there. And I'm boycotting PS6 just simply based off the fact it's going to be $1,200, $1,500 for a console, which I will never pay that much for a console. Not to mention a console that won't have any exclusives on it for years to come. So, but there is a movement here to boycott PlayStation and to go to PC. Now, interestingly enough, people say, well, PC's all digital. Yes, but you actually own your games. You actually have digital rights management there. And you don't with PlayStation. PlayStation, bare minimum, should offer some kind of alternative to be able to have some digital rights over your property. And you currently do not. At all. And this is absolutely killer, not just for new games, but for backwards compatibility as well.
PlayStation 5 so you can play the games you already own, but why keep investing in a platform that doesn't really seem to even care about sticking around, right? But ever since this happened, a lot of people have been chiming in about what this means specifically. There was this weird statement that essentially now Sony is claiming that while the discs themselves will stop production, certain people will be able to reproduce them. That basically, like, if they're printed on Insomniac discs, Insomniac themselves is allowed to print more of them. So basically, they're saying that there will still be some discs, just 2028 going forward, there will be no discs whatsoever. It is basically this tiny final limited run, which to me definitely signals the fact that A, the PlayStation 6 is coming out in 2028 or probably, holiday 2027. And additionally, I think this is a sign about the fact that Sony is literally disassembling even the process of making it. In fact, there is leaks right now that apparently the PlayStation disc plant is already reassigning staff to make other products. There's talk about that essentially they're going to start making legitimately, not joking, they're trying to make AI lenses, little tech that's basically sold to AI companies. It sounds like essentially instead of making discs, they're going to try and just sell the parts of the factory itself to get some AI money. But here was an interesting take I saw people bring up a lot. This is actually one of the previous CEOs of President PlayStation, Sean Layden. Sean Layden, very beloved guy. He made a couple of missteps with stuff like investing so hard into the mobile market, trying to do a big launch of the PlayStation Vita. But you can't really say that he screwed anything up. You can say that he made big gambles that didn't pay off. But in the business world, that's the unforgivable sin, is wasting money, right? But Sean Layden's been very interesting because ever since his retirement, especially because of how young he still is, he's been doing the podcast circuit. He does like to talk about PlayStation, about how everything's
going. So PlayStation's own former president is very unhappy with what is going on. In fact, we're about to read his quote here. Unlike Xbox, PlayStation had a wider global fan base, and not just in numbers, but in reach. Because Sony Corp had reach all over the world. The idea that you could still buy a PlayStation 4 game, throw it in a machine, and play it was important. You don't want to leave these people behind. I don't know what went on in these conversations, but it's a fairly dramatic decision. That's bad. That's bad when that's your guy. That's your former president, right? PlayStation always does stupid shit when they feel like they don't have to worry about anything.
100 copies of Spider-Man.
But here's the real rub. Here's the real rub. PlayStation lied about the physical attach rate of games in order to sell and spin this narrative, which obviously doesn't work anyway. This narrative fails on arrival. Nobody's happy about this. You're taking away a feature.
Discs. And a lot of people just don't like that because it's not just that we don't believe this number, right? This number they keep kicking around. 85% of all games on PlayStation are digital. Now this is an interesting number because people would think of it as, okay, there's 100 copies of Spider-Man sold, 85 of them are digital. When that's not really it. Instead, the way they actually do this math is digital units sold divided by total units sold times 100. So what he's saying here essentially is that, so it's Sony sold 74.6 million units of a game, digital and physical. But that means 85% are digital, right? No. What it actually comes out to is that essentially they're counting the digital sales against the total physical sales, meaning that if everyone who stopped buying physical games the past 5 years went out and bought a game a month.
So essentially, of course digital is going to be more by a lot because there's a lot of games that are only available digitally that never had a physical print whatsoever. So, yes, 85% of games are bought digital, but you really should compare 1-to-1 when a game is available both physical and digital. What is the actual percentage?
It still would mean that technically digital dominates over physical. Because think of all the indie games. Think of all the digital-only games. Think of all the random tiny $2 indie games you bought just as a joke. Or all the digital games you downloaded stuff for free. Like, say you wanted to try out Apex Legends or Fortnite. Each of those are digital sales. Stuff that does skew the number in this very, very bad math. Now, real quick, I do want to say, Canadian Guy A, this dude's been tweeting a lot of very interesting deep dive numbers, great stuff. Simultaneously, this guy writes a little bit like the Unabomber. But we're going to go past the fact this looks a little bit like a manifesto. And I want to take a look at this quote here by Nip. Seen several quotes about PlayStation's 78% digital sales, thus omitting the important context, which is the fact that these splits from PlayStation's leaks.
And these splits are interesting. Physical versus digital split. Sackboy. Let's see what this. Hold on a second.
This is not like public data. There is some public data as well that basically games are selling physically, but also according to the Insomniac League. Now, when this got hacked, this is their data. This is literally Insomniac talking to PlayStation and PlayStation talking to Insomniac. This is not some like loosey-goosey conceptual chat GPT stuff. This is legitimately the company talking to itself. And they said the physical digital splits. Look at this right here. Sackboy, 77% physical. Ratchet.
So here's what's crazy. I actually couldn't believe these numbers when I seen them. But if you look at PlayStation produced first-party games, it skews not just more physical than what the numbers would suggest. It is overwhelmingly more physical. In fact, Sackboy sold 77% physical versus 23% digital. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, 76% physical, 24% digital. Ghost of Tsushima sold 71% physical, 29% digital. Demon Souls, 70-30 in favor of physical. Miles Morales, 66-34 in favor of physical. Spider-Man, 66-34 in favor of physical. Returnal, 61-39 in favor of physical. Ghost of Tsushima, that is a newer PlayStation title than those, 51% physical, 49% digital. That is a title that literally came out last year for Sony with a 50-50 split. And then MLB The Show 21, 39% physical, 61% digital. Remember, that title was on Game Pass as well. And Uncharted 4 actually had an 83% to 17% physical split. That, granted, that was some number of years ago. But in each case, even Ghost of Tsushima, the physical split has been better than the digital split for PlayStation first-party games. So what Sony is doing is really, they're trying to force players who like to buy games physically into buying digitally. And it doesn't look like it's going to work. So, PC is the only area of gaming that's growing. Console is not growing. It's shrinking. And mobile is even shrinking. PC is about to get a boom. This is what that's telling me. Nintendo might get a bump, right? But PC is going to get a bump as well. Big time. And PlayStation is going to be suffering from this move. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching this video. I will see y'all later. RJ out.